Hello students, I'm Dr. Shilpashri and welcome to my channel Study Management. In this video, we will be studying a very interesting concept in organizational behavior, that is perception. Let us begin this module with the story of 6 blind men and an elephant. This is a very old and famous story about 6 blind men who came across an elephant for the first time in their lives, and they tried to form an idea about the animal by touching it. As all the 6 men were blind, neither of them could see the whole elephant, and so they approached the elephant from different directions. The first blind man, touching the body of the elephant, said, "An elephant is like a wall." The second blind man touched the trunk of the elephant and he declared that an elephant is like a snake. The third blind man touched the tusk of the elephant and said an elephant is like a spear. While the fourth blind man touched the leg of the elephant and he said that it is like a tree. The fifth blind man touched the ear of the elephant and said it is like a fan. And finally, the sixth blind man touching the tail of the elephant said the elephant is like a rope. So all the 6 blind men had a different perception about the elephant. Each one had his own opinion, firmly based on his own experience of what an elephant is really like. They all tried to give meaning to what they had experienced by touching the animal. As all the 6 men were arguing with each other about how the elephant looks from their own viewpoints, a villager passing by overheard their conversation and said that all of you are correct, as each of you has touched a different part of the elephant and it consists of all those features that each one of you have described. Thus, from this story, it is very clear that perception simply refers to the way we view the world around us. It is the process by which an individual gives meaning to the environment. In other words, it is a process of interpretation of a present stimulus on the basis of past experience. That is, when a person is confronted with a situation or stimuli, he interprets the stimuli into something meaningful to him based on his past experiences. Like in the story, the elephant being the stimulus was perceived in 6 different ways by the 6 blind men based on their own past experiences. But here it is important to note that what an individual interprets or perceives may be different from reality, and also the perception varies from one individual to another. Let us go through the different definitions of perception. Stephen P. Robbins defines perception as a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. According to Angel, perception is a process whereby stimuli are received and interpreted by the individual and translated into a response. So from the above two definitions, we can understand perception as a process through which the information from outside environment is received, selected, organized and interpreted to make it meaningful. This information is obtained through the 5 senses, namely seeing, hearing, touch, taste and smell. Now let us understand the process of perception. It is also known as perceptual process. The perceptual process is the sequence of the psychological steps that a person uses in his mind to organize and interpret the information that he has received from the outside world. This is the simplified process of perception that includes 3 different stages: perceptual inputs, perceptual throughputs and perceptual outputs. The perceptual input includes the stimuli in the environment. The stimuli may be either in the form of the object, event or people. The perceptual throughputs is nothing but the actual transformation of the input that has been received by the individual from the environment. And finally, the perceptual outputs are the resultant opinions, feelings, attitudes that influence the behavior of an individual. Receiving stimuli. Receiving the stimuli from the environment is the first and most important stage in the process of perception. It is the initial stage in which a person receives the information through the five sense organs, namely touch, taste, hearing, sight, and smell. Selecting the stimuli is the second stage in the process of perception. It is not possible for a person to select all the stimuli which he receives from the environment. A person selects only some information out of all in accordance with his interest or needs, and the selection of the information is influenced by various external and internal factors. Let us understand the various external factors influencing selection of the stimuli. The first important factor is size. Generally, objects of larger size attract more attention than the smaller ones. For example, if you have observed yourself while reading the newspaper, especially the headlines printed in the large size letters are selected first for reading. This is a general tendency among most of the readers. The second important factor is intensity. A stimuli of higher intensity are perceived more than the objects with low intensity. A loud sound, strong smell, bright light is noticed more when compared to a soft sound, weak odor or dim light. For this reason, TV advertisements have a higher intensity of sound than the other regular TV programs, mainly to gain the attention of the viewers. The third important factor is repetition. A repeated external stimuli draws more attention than a single one. Repetition increases people's sensitivity. Advertisers use this strategy as repeated advertisements of the same product attract people's attention. Even in the case of organization, supervisors follow this principle to give repeated instructions to the workers for even simple routine work to gain their attention. The fourth important factor is contrast. External stimulus that stands out distinctly or uniquely against the normal background or which are not what people are expecting receive more attention. For example, people dressed differently than others, letters of bold types, buildings of different colors in the same locality get more attention. Contrast is a kind of uniqueness which can be used for attention getting. The next important factor is movement. People pay greater attention to moving objects rather than to stationary objects. Advertisers use this principle. They generally prefer TV commercial ads than print media to promote their products, as TV advertisements involve movement of objects than the print media. The next important factor is novelty and familiarity. New objects or events in a familiar setting or familiar objects in a new setting are likely to draw the attention of the perceiver. For example, in job rotation, when workers' jobs are changed from one to another frequently, they become more attentive to their new jobs as compared to the previous ones. Now let us understand the various internal factors influencing selection of the stimuli. The first important factor is psychological needs of the individual. Needs play a significant role in perceptual selectivity. Unreal things often appear to look real because of the deprived needs. For example, a thirsty person in a desert gets the illusion of seeing water in the sand from a distance, even though there is no water in the desert. Second important factor is self-concept. An individual with a positive self-concept tends to notice only positive qualities in another person, whereas an individual with a negative self-concept always tends to pick out the negative qualities in another person. The third important factor is motivation. Motivation also plays an important role in influencing the perception. For example, a hungry person will be very sensitive to the smell or sight of food than a person who is not that hungry. And the next important factor is interest. The interest of individuals draws more attention and recognition to the stimuli. For example, an architect who is very much interested in buildings will notice even the minute details of the buildings whenever he passes through a particular locality. Whereas some other person who is not that very interested in buildings may not notice such minute details even though he passes through those buildings several years. The next important factor is experience. Experience and knowledge also have a great influence on perception. The next important step in the perception process after selecting the stimuli is organizing the stimuli. The selected stimuli received from the environment must be organized so as to assign some meaning to them. This aspect of forming bits of information into meaningful ones is called as perceptual organization. The organization of the stimuli is influenced by three important factors, and they are: first one, figure ground; second, perceptual grouping; and third, perceptual constancy. Figure ground is one of the most important factor influencing the organization of the stimuli. Perceived object, event or person stands distinct from its background and gets cognitive attention of the individual. In perception, certain factors are considered significant which give meaning to the person, and others are left as insignificant. The meaningful portion is known as figure and the insignificant portion is known as ground. You can better understand the concept of figure ground by viewing this particular image. In this image, if the background is perceived as white, the figure is a black vase. If the background is seen as black, the figure is two white faces. This is known as figure ground principle. The figure ground principle states that the relationship of a target to its background influences perception. In other words, perceived objects stand out as separable from their general background. At the first look, the figure looks like a black vase, but if black is taken as a background, one can see two white faces. The second important factor influencing organization of stimuli is perceptual grouping, and under this perceptual grouping, the grouping of the stimuli is done based on three different principles. The first one is principle of proximity. The term proximity here refers to closeness or nearness, and according to this principle, a group of several stimuli that are close to each other will be perceived as a whole group. For example, all employees working in a particular department may be grouped together because of physical proximity, and suppose if the output of the department is unsatisfactory, then all the employees working in that particular department may be perceived as inefficient, even though there may be some employees who are efficient. The second important principle is principle of similarity. The principle of similarity states that greater the similarity of the stimuli, greater is the tendency to perceive them as a common group. For example, when objects of similar shape, size or color are grouped together, irrespective of the closeness or nearness of the stimuli, then they come under the principle of similarity. And third important principle is closure. When information is inadequate or incomplete, the individual tends to fill the gap to give meaning to the incomplete information based on his past experience or past records. For example, if the manager has to take promotion decisions, they may not have complete information about the suitability of an employee for a higher position. In such cases, he may rely more on past records of the employee, and if he has done well in the past, he may be perceived to do equally good in the higher position, although the requirement of the higher position may be totally different from the position in which he is working currently. The next important factor influencing organization of the stimuli is perceptual constancy. Perceptual constancy means perceiving an object in a stable or constant manner despite any changes in distance, viewing angle or lighting. In other words, perceptual constancy is The object is perceived as the same in varying conditions. Perceptual constancy can happen in three different ways. The first kind is shape constancy. Whenever an object appears to maintain its shape despite marked changes in the retinal image. For example, whether we view the bangle from any direction, from the right, front, or side, its shape is always round. The second kind is color constancy. It implies that familiar objects are perceived to be of the same color in varied conditions. For example, for the owner of a blue car, the color is the same whether he views it in dim light or bright sunlight. And the third kind is size constancy. It refers to the fact that as an object is moved far away, we tend to see it as more or less invariant in size. That is, there is no change in the size. For example, the players in the opposite side of the field do not look smaller than those closer to you, even though their images on the retina of the eye appear to be smaller. Once the information has been organized by the perceiver, the next step in the perception process is interpreting. In this stage, the perceiver assigns meaning to the information that he has received and organized. The various factors influencing interpretation includes perceptual set, attribution, stereotyping, and halo effect. Now, let us understand the various factors influencing interpretation of the stimuli. The first and foremost important factor is perceptual set. Previously held beliefs about objects influence an individual's perception of similar objects. This is perceptual set. For example, a manager may have developed a general belief that workers are lazy. According to him, they try to gain whatever possible from the organization without giving their best to the organization. So, whenever he comes across a group of workers or meets them, he always has this mental attitude that workers are lazy. This is perceptual set. The second important factor is attribution. When people give cause and effect explanation to the observed behavior, it is known as attribution. When we observe an individual's behavior, we attempt to determine whether it was internally or externally caused. So attribution can be internal attribution or external attribution. For example, if an employee is late for work, the manager may relate it to oversleeping. He interprets that because the employee got up late in the morning, he was not able to report on time to work. And this is internal attribution. Internally caused behavior is believed to be under the control of the individual. That is, if the employee got up early in the morning, he could have come on time to work. But if the manager considers that the employee is late due to a major traffic jam, it is external attribution. Externally caused behavior is beyond the control of the individual. The third important factor is stereotyping. It occurs when a person judges or perceives another person on the basis of the characteristics of the group to which he belongs. For example, perception based on nationality, race, community, religion, gender, etc. Example for stereotyping based on nationality are statements like Japanese are very hardworking, Americans are materialistic, Germans are ambitious, and so on. The last type of factor is halo effect. Drawing a general impression about an individual on the basis of a single quality or a single trait or characteristics is halo effect. A typical example of halo effect is a professor awarding more marks to a well-liked student. The final stage in the perception process is response or action. The perceiver, once the information has been interpreted by him, will finalize his reaction with some action in relation to his or her perception, which may be a favorable or unfavorable one. In this stage, the response of the perceiver takes on both covert and overt characteristics. Covert response will be reflected in the attitudes, motives, and feelings of the perceiver, whereas the overt responses will be reflected in his actions. Now, let us understand the importance of perception in organization. Perception helps to understand, predict, and control the behavior of individuals in the organization. It helps to categorize the information and interpret it effectively. It helps to set performance goals in the organization. It helps in decision making, particularly in the top level. It helps to organize the things or situations effectively. It helps to analyze the needs of various departments. It helps to identify the career path of employee in an organization. Here, I have listed few books on organizational behavior that covers the concept of perception that you can refer for your further reading and understanding. I hope you have enjoyed watching my video. Thanks for watching and please do like, share and subscribe to my channel.